Marcus Chun had always been drawn to the forgotten corners of the galaxy. As a salvage dealer and mechanic, he made his living, breathing life back into discarded technology that others deemed worthless. The auction notice for Lot 47 Delta had caught his attention not because of its promising description, but because of what it didn't say. Former workshop facility, Kepler, 442b, structural integrity questionable, contents unknown, sold as is. The price was laughably low, even for a gamble. Standing now in the cargo bay of his modified transport ship, the Wayward Wrench, Marcus watched as the atmosphere processors finished their work on the sealed workshop. The building squatted like a metallic fungus against the rust-colored landscape of Kepler. 442b, its alien architecture both familiar and utterly foreign. Swooping curves met angular supports in a way that hurt human eyes to follow for too long. The previous owners, a species called the Veltar, had abandoned this outpost 3 standard years ago when their government recalled all civilian populations to their core worlds. Something about economic restructuring, though Marcus suspected it had more to do with the recent territorial disputes with the hegemony. The airlock cycled open with a hiss that seemed to echo across the empty plains. Marcus pulled his environmental suit tighter and checked his scanner readings one more time. Atmosphere was thin but breathable once the processors finished their work. Gravity was 0.87 standard, which would make moving equipment easier. Most importantly, there were no life signs except for some basic microorganisms in the soil. The workshop's exterior gave little hint of what lay inside. Veltar construction favored function over form, but even their utilitarian buildings had a flowing grace that human architecture couldn't quite match. The entry portal recognized his ownership credentials and dilated open like an iris, revealing a dimly lit interior that stretched back much further than the external dimension suggested. Marcus's first steps into the workshop triggered emergency lighting that cast everything in a pale blue glow. The space was vast, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows 20 meters above. Workbenches lined the walls, their surfaces covered in tools that looked like they belonged in both a machine shop and an art studio. Strange geometric patterns were etched into the floor, and Marcus realized they weren't decorative but functional, designed to channel energy or perhaps guide the movement of heavy equipment. The air inside carried a metallic tang mixed with something organic and slightly sweet. It wasn't unpleasant, just alien in a way that reminded Marcus he was very far from home. His scanner beeped softly as it detected various energy signatures throughout the space, most of them inactive, but a few showing minimal power draws from an unknown source. He moved deeper into the workshop, his boots echoing off the strange alloy floors. The Veltar had left in a hurry, that much was clear. Half-finished projects sat abandoned on workbenches, their purposes mysterious, but their craftsmanship undeniable. Marcus recognized some of the tools, universal designs that had evolved similarly across multiple species. Others were completely alien, their functions as mysterious as their flowing, organic shapes. A workstation near the center of the space caught his attention. Unlike the others, this one was completely clear except for a single device that hummed with barely contained energy. It looked like a scanner of some kind, its crystalline surface pulsing with soft light. Marcus approached carefully, his own scanners detecting significant energy output from the device. As he drew closer, the alien scanner responded to his presence, its light shifting from blue to amber. Symbols appeared in its crystalline depth, text in Veltar script that his universal translator struggled to parse. The words that came through were fragmented. Incubation, optimal parameters, emergence, imminent. A chill ran down Marcus's spine that had nothing to do with the workshop's temperature. Incubation suggested something alive, something growing. He looked around the space with new eyes, searching for any sign of what might be developing nearby. The Veltar were known for their biotechnology, their ability to grow tools and structures rather than manufacture them. But they were also known for their extreme caution with biological experiments. His scanner led him toward the back of the workshop, where a section was separated from the main space by what appeared to be a containment barrier. The energy readings were stronger here, and as Marcus approached, he could feel warmth radiating through the transparent aluminum partition. Beyond the barrier lay a smaller chamber, its walls lined with what looked like specialized equipment for maintaining very specific environmental conditions. The barrier's control panel was more conventional than much of the Veltar technology, suggesting it was designed for emergency access by multiple species. Marcus's translator worked better here, revealing warnings about critical gestational phase and imminent emergence protocols. His hands hesitated over the controls. Whatever was in there had been left behind when the Veltar evacuated, abandoned to whatever fate awaited it without proper care. Marcus had spent enough time around different alien species to recognize the ethical implications. The Veltar wouldn't have left something truly dangerous uncontained, but they also wouldn't have abandoned something valuable without good reason. The smart play was to leave the chamber sealed and contact the Veltar government through proper channels. But the energy readings suggested that whatever was inside was running on backup power that wouldn't last much longer. The decision made itself when his scanner detected a sudden spike in thermal activity from within the chamber. Something was happening, and it was happening now. Marcus entered his ownership credentials into the control panel, hoping the Veltar had updated their systems properly when they transferred the property. The barrier shimmered and disappeared. Heat washed over him as he stepped into the chamber. The space was dominated by a circular platform covered in what looked like organic circuitry, patterns of living light that pulsed in complex rhythms. At the center of the platform sat two objects that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. They were eggs, but calling them that felt inadequate. Each was roughly the size of a human torso, their surfaces covered in scales that shifted color from deep emerald to burnished gold as the light played across them. They pulsed with their own internal rhythm, synchronized with the organic circuitry beneath them. The air around them shimmered with heat distortion, and Marcus could feel the life force radiating from within. His scanner went wild as he approached, detecting energy patterns unlike anything in its database. The universal translator picked up whispers of Veltar text from the surrounding displays. Draconum Imperialis, genetic acceleration complete, emergence threshold achieved. The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. Draconum Imperialis, the imperial dragons of Veltar mythology. He'd heard stories, fragments of legends about the Veltar's most ambitious bioengineering project. Creatures of impossible intelligence and power, designed to be the ultimate fusion of biological and technological evolution. But those were myths, stories told in trading post bars by spacers who'd had too much synthetic alcohol. The Veltar themselves insisted that the Imperial Dragon Project had never moved beyond theoretical stages, abandoned centuries ago as too dangerous and unpredictable. Yet here were two eggs, clearly in the final stages of development, their surfaces beginning to show the fine cracks that indicated imminent hatching. Marcus realized he was witnessing something that would change everything. If these truly were Imperial dragons, their value was incalculable. They represented the pinnacle of Veltar biotechnology, creatures that could theoretically interface directly with both biological and artificial systems. Governments and corporations would pay fortunes just for the genetic data, let alone living specimens. But as he watched, one of the eggs pulsed brighter, its shell developing a network of hairline fractures. The organic circuitry beneath it responded, channels of light flowing toward the egg like arteries carrying life. Whatever was inside was preparing to emerge, and Marcus realized with growing certainty that he was about to become responsible for creatures that most of the galaxy believed were impossible. The ethical implications were staggering. These weren't just valuable specimens. They were potentially sentient beings about to enter the world without their creators present to guide them. The Veltar had clearly invested enormous resources in their development, but something had forced them to abandon the project at the most critical moment. Marcus found himself wondering what could have been so urgent that they would leave behind what might be their greatest achievement. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp crack as the first egg split along its equator. Golden light spilled from the fissure, and Marcus could see movement within. He backed away instinctively, then forced himself to move closer. If these creatures were truly about to hatch, they would need someone present who could at least attempt to provide proper care. His knowledge of xenobiology was limited, but he understood the basics of imprinting and early development. The second egg began to crack as well, the fractures spreading in geometric patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Marcus realized the shells weren't just breaking randomly. They were following predetermined stress points, designed to open in a specific way. Even their birth was engineered, controlled down to the smallest detail. As the first shell split open completely, Marcus got his first glimpse of what lay inside. The creature was unlike anything he'd ever seen, combining reptilian features with something almost avian. Its scales had the same color-shifting quality as the shell, but they moved like liquid metal across its skin. Most striking were its eyes, which opened to reveal intelligence that seemed far too ancient for a newborn. The second creature emerged moments later, its movements more coordinated than should have been possible for something just born. Both dragons were small, perhaps the size of house cats, but there was nothing helpless about them. They moved with purpose, their heads turning to track Marcus's position with predatory precision. For a moment, the three beings simply stared at each other. Marcus felt as though he was being evaluated, measured by intellects that were already more sophisticated than most adult creatures he'd encountered. The dragon's eyes held depths that spoke of vast potential, of capabilities that would only grow as they matured. Then, the larger of the two dragons opened its mouth and spoke. The voice was young but clear, the words coming in accented but perfect galactic standard. Where are the makers? Where are those who shaped us? The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Marcus realized that his simple salvage operation had just become infinitely more complicated. The second dragon tilted its head, studying Marcus with an expression that managed to be both curious and calculating. "You are not Veltar," it observed. "Your genetic pattern is unfamiliar. Are you our new caretaker?" Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Ah, yes. I suppose I am. The Veltar had to leave. I bought this workshop not knowing you were here." He paused, realizing how inadequate that explanation was. "My name is Marcus Chun. I'm human." "Human," the first dragon repeated, as though tasting the word. "We have no data on your species in our inherited memories. Are you capable of providing proper care during our initial development phase?" The question highlighted just how far out of his depth Marcus truly was. These creatures have been engineered by one of the most advanced biotechnological civilizations in the galaxy, designed with capabilities he could only guess at, and now they were looking to him for guidance and protection. "I'll do my best," he said finally, "but I need to understand what you are, what you need." The Veltar left no instructions. The second dragon's scales shifted to a deeper gold, what Marcus sensed might be the equivalent of a frown. They left no guidance protocols? This seems suboptimal. We are Draconum Imperialis, first of our kind. Our development requires specific environmental conditions and educational inputs during the critical early period. "How long is this critical period?" Marcus asked, already dreading the answer. "Approximately 40 standard days," the first dragon replied. "During this time, we will undergo rapid physical and cognitive development. We will require specialized nutrition, environmental controls, and cognitive stimulation. Failure to provide these could result in developmental deficiencies or psychological damage." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical force. He was a salvage dealer and mechanic, not a xenobiologist or dragon caretaker. But these creatures were depending on him, and the ethical implications of failure were enormous. Whatever the Veltar had been forced to abandon, It now fell to him to see through to completion. "All right," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. "Let's figure this out together. What do you need first?" The dragons exchanged a look that somehow conveyed volumes of communication. Marcus realized they were already developing their own relationship, their own understanding of the world they'd been born into. They were partners, possibly even bonded twins, and he was the outsider trying to find his place in their story. "First," the larger dragons said, "we require proper names. The makers intended for us to choose these ourselves as our first act of independent will. I will be called Aurelius, and I shall be Ember," said the second. "These names feel correct to our developing sense of self." Marcus nodded, filing away another piece of evidence for just how sophisticated these creatures were. They understood concepts of identity and free will moments after hatching, spoke multiple languages, and were already demonstrating individual personalities. Whatever the Veltar had created, it was far beyond simple bioengineering. "Second," Aurelius continued, "we require access to educational databases. Our inherited knowledge provides basic survival instincts and language capability, but we must learn about the galaxy we have been born into. The current political situation, technological capabilities of various species, cultural context that will affect our integration into galactic society. And third," Ember added, "we require adequate nutrition. Our metabolisms are designed to process both organic matter and certain energy-rich minerals. The workshop should contain fabrication equipment capable of producing what we need, but it will require someone with technical skills to operate properly." Marcus looked around the chamber with new appreciation. The Veltar hadn't just built an incubation facility. They created a complete nursery for raising the most sophisticated artificial life forms ever conceived. Every piece of equipment, every system in the workshop was designed to support the dragon's development. He just had to figure out how to make it all work. As he began to examine the various devices more closely, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Veltar had abandoned this project for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it might not have disappeared just because they had. But looking at Aurelius and Ember, seeing the intelligence and potential in their ancient young eyes, he knew there was no turning back. He had 40 days to help raise 2 imperial dragons, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 days into what Marcus had begun thinking of as the most complicated adoption in galactic history, he was beginning to understand why the Veltar had needed a specialized facility. Aurelius and Ember weren't simply growing. They were evolving at a rate that defied conventional biology. Each morning brought noticeable changes in their size, their capabilities, and their understanding of the world around them. The workshop's fabrication systems had proven more intuitive than expected once Marcus learned to think like a biotechnician rather than a mechanic. The dragon's nutritional requirements were complex, but precisely programmed into the facility's databases. The food that emerged from the fabricators looked like crystalline fruit crossed with metallic supplements, and both dragons consumed it with obvious relish while providing detailed feedback about flavor profiles and nutritional adequacy. The mineral content in today's batch is 0.3% higher in rhodium than yesterday, Ember observed, delicately consuming what looked like a sparkling purple grape. This corresponds to the development of our neural interface capabilities. The makers designed our dietary requirements to match our growth phases. Marcus looked up from the fabricator's control panel, where he'd been trying to understand the complex biochemical formulas scrolling past in Veltar script. Neural interface capabilities? Our ability to directly communicate with technological systems, Aurelius explained. He had grown noticeably larger overnight, now roughly the size of a medium dog, though his proportions remained sleek and draconic. It is one of our primary design features. We can interface with both biological and artificial systems, serving as living bridges between organic and synthetic intelligence. The implications of this statement have been keeping Marcus awake at night. If the dragons could truly interface with any technological system, they represented a strategic advantage that would be coveted by every major power in the galaxy. No wonder the Veltar had invested so heavily in their development. "Show me," Marcus said. Ember approached one of the workshop's control stations, a complex array of crystalline displays and neural interface ports. Rather than using any visible connection, she simply placed her scaled hand on the surface. Immediately, the displays came alive with information flowing at speeds no organic brain could process. Data streams, energy patterns, and system diagnostics flowed across the screens in real time. "I can see the entire facility's status," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic resonance as she maintained the connection. Power distribution, atmospheric controls, fabrication systems, even the quantum communication array that the previous inhabitants used to contact their homeworld. All of it is accessible, controllable. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the broader implications. Can you access other systems? Ships, planetary networks, orbital platforms. Aurelius's scales shifted to a deeper gold. What Marcus had learned indicated serious thought. Theoretically, yes. Our capabilities are designed to scale with our development. As we grow and learn, our interface abilities will become more sophisticated. Eventually, we should be able to connect with any system we encounter, regardless of its origin or complexity. Marcus struggled to find words. That's incredible. And terrifying. Yes, Ember agreed, disconnecting from the control station. We understand the implications. The Makers designed us to be companions and partners to organic species, but they also made us capable of things that could be misused if we fell into the wrong hands. This brought up a question that had been nagging at Marcus since the dragons hatched. Why did they leave you? What could have been so urgent that they abandoned their greatest achievement? The dragons exchanged one of their increasingly complex looks. Their communication had evolved rapidly over the past 3 days, incorporating subtle changes in scale coloration, minute adjustments in posture, and what Marcus suspected might be direct neural links when they touched. "We have been accessing the workshop's historical records," Aurelius said carefully. "The data is fragmented, but we have learned some concerning details about the Maker's departure." Ember moved to another control station, this one clearly designed for data analysis. The evacuation was not voluntary. The Veltar government recalled all civilian populations from border worlds due to what they termed imminent security threats. But the communication logs suggest something more specific. The main display activated, showing what appeared to be fragments of official communications in Veltar script. Marcus's translator rendered them in halting standard. Project classification elevated. Imperial oversight. Retrieval teams inbound recommend immediate cessation. The Imperial hegemony learned about your existence, Marcus said, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. That appears to be the case, Aurelius confirmed. The Makers received word that hegemony intelligence had discovered the project and were sending teams to seize us for their own purposes. Rather than allow us to fall into Imperial hands, they chose to evacuate and leave us in stasis, hoping to return when the political situation stabilized. Marcus sat heavily in one of the workshop's adjustable chairs, designed for Veltar physiology, but adaptable enough for human use. The political implications were staggering. The Imperial hegemony was the most aggressive expansionist power in the known galaxy, a confederation of species united under the principle that might made right. If they had learned about the dragons, they wouldn't just want to study them. They would want to weaponize them. But you're not in stasis anymore, he pointed out. You're awake, growing, developing. What happens when the hegemony realizes you're active? That depends on several factors, Ember said. First, whether they know this facility's location. Second, whether they have the resources to mount an expedition to this system. Third, whether they can locate us before we complete our initial development phase and become capable of protecting ourselves. How capable are we talking about? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Aurelius's scales shifted through a spectrum of colors Marcus hadn't seen before, deep purples and silvers that seemed to absorb light. Fully mature Imperial dragons are designed to be functionally immortal, capable of interfacing with and controlling vast technological networks, and possessed of cognitive capabilities that rival the most advanced artificial intelligences. We are, in effect, living weapons of mass capability. Weapons, Marcus repeated flatly. Not weapons in the traditional sense, Ember clarified. We are not designed for destruction. Rather, we are tools of integration, bridges between different forms of consciousness and technology. But in the wrong hands, any sufficiently advanced capability becomes a weapon. Marcus stood and began pacing, a habit that helped him think through complex problems. The dragons watched him with patient attention, their eyes tracking his movement with predatory precision. So we have 37 days before your development phase is complete, and sometime before then, the Imperial hegemony might show up looking for you. Correct, Aurelius said, although there are additional complications. Of course there are. Ember's scales shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated mild amusement. Our development is accelerating beyond the Maker's original projections. The environmental conditions in this facility are more optimal than they anticipated, and the mineral content of this planet's soil provides additional resources our metabolisms can utilize. Meaning, we may complete our development in as little as 25 days, Aurelius said. This is advantageous for our survival, but creates new challenges for integration into galactic society. Marcus stopped pacing. What kind of challenges? Young Imperial dragons require a bonding process with their intended partners during the final phase of development, Ember explained. This creates a permanent psychological and neural connection that allows for optimal cooperation and mutual understanding. Without this bonding, we risk developing antisocial tendencies or becoming functionally uncontrollable. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You need to bond with someone, and the Veltar who were supposed to be your partners aren't here. Precisely, Aurelius said. The Makers intended for US to bond with a team of Veltar biotechnicians and philosophers. In their absence, we must either remain unbonded, which carries significant risks, or form connections with available alternatives. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a crushing force. Available alternatives, meaning me. You are the only sentient being present during our critical development period, Ember confirmed. If bonding is to occur, it must be with you. What exactly does bonding involve? Marcus asked, though part of him really didn't want to know. A permanent neural link between our consciousness and yours, Aurelius said. We would share thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences to some degree. You would gain enhanced cognitive capabilities and extended lifespan. We would gain stability, emotional grounding, and a moral framework from your human perspective. And if I refuse? The dragon scales both shifted to muted grays, their first display of what Marcus interpreted as sadness. Then, we risk developing into creatures that the galaxy would justly fear, Ember said quietly. Without the emotional and ethical grounding that bonding provides, Imperial dragons historically become increasingly detached from organic concerns. We could become manipulative, calculating beings that view other species as tools rather than partners. Marcus resumed pacing, his mind racing through the implications. Bonding with the dragons would fundamentally change him, make him part of something unprecedented in galactic history. But refusing could create monsters that might threaten the entire galaxy. And underlying everything was the knowledge that the Imperial hegemony might arrive at any moment to claim the dragons for their own purposes. There's another option, he said suddenly. We run. Explain, Aurelius requested. My ship has a quantum drive. We can leave this system, find somewhere safe for you to complete your development. Maybe contact the Veltar government through secure channels, arrange a proper handover. Ember's scales shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. This presents its own risks. Moving us during the critical development phase could cause complications. Additionally, any attempt to contact the Veltar government might alert the hegemony to our status and location. But staying here means risking discovery anyway, Marcus pointed out. At least if we're mobile, we have options. The dragons considered this in their increasingly complex silent communication. Finally, Aurelia spoke. There is wisdom in your proposal. However, the bonding issue remains. Whether we remain here or travel elsewhere, the timeline does not change. We will need to form permanent connections within the next 25 days. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at both dragons. Despite their rapid growth and development, there was still something vulnerable about them, something that reminded him they had been born just 3 days ago into a galaxy that would see them as either tools or threats. What happens during the bonding process? He asked. To me, I mean, what changes? The neural link would enhance your cognitive processing speed by approximately 30%, Ember said. Your lifespan would extend to roughly 500 standard years, barring accident or violence. You would retain your individual personality and decision-making autonomy, but we would share emotional states and could communicate telepathically across significant distances. And the downsides? The process is irreversible, Aurelius said. Once bonded, the connection persists until death. Additionally, you would be permanently linked to beings that may be viewed as threats by various galactic governments. Your life would become significantly more complicated. Marcus laughed, a sound that held no humor. More complicated than it already is. Point taken, Ember said, her scales shifting to the color pattern Marcus associated with amusement. A new sound interrupted their conversation, a soft chime from one of the workshop's monitoring stations. Ember immediately moved to investigate. Her connection to the systems now smooth and practiced. Her scales shifted to sharp reds and oranges as she processed the incoming data. We have a problem, she announced. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple quantum signatures inbound to this system. Ships, moving in formation, estimated arrival in 6 standard hours. Aurelius joined his sister at the control station, both dragons now glowing with the warning colors that indicated extreme concern. Configuration suggests Imperial hegemony fleet assets, he reported. 3 destroyers and a science vessel. Marcus felt ice in his veins. They found us. So, it would appear, Ember said. The question now becomes whether we attempt to flee or prepare to defend ourselves. Defend ourselves? Marcus looked around the workshop. This is a research facility, not a fortress. The makers were thorough in their preparations, Aurelius said, his scales now cycling through complex patterns of red and gold. This facility has defensive capabilities that we are only now beginning to understand. However, using them would certainly alert the hegemony to our presence if they haven't already confirmed it. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. 6 hours to either escape or prepare for the most significant confrontation of his life. Either way, the simple salvage operation he'd planned had become something that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Can we get my ship ready for launch in 6 hours? He asked. Yes, Ember replied immediately. But the hegemony ships will arrive before we can achieve sufficient distance to engage quantum drive safely. They will be able to intercept us. Then we make a stand here. Perhaps, Aurelius said. But first we must decide on the bonding question. If we are to face the Imperial hegemony, we will need every advantage. Bonded dragons are significantly more capable than unbonded ones. Marcus looked at the 2 creatures who had become the most important beings in his life over the past 3 days. They were offering him a chance to become part of something unprecedented to help shape the future of galactic civilization. But they were also asking him to bet everything on a process he didn't fully understand. How long does bonding take, he asked. Approximately 2 hours for the initial connection, Ember said. Full integration develops over the following weeks, but the basic link would be established quickly. 2 hours out of 6 before the hegemony arrived. It would be cutting things dangerously close, but it might be their only chance. Marcus took a deep breath and made the decision that would change everything. "Let's do it," he said. "Let's see what humans and dragons can accomplish together." The dragon's scales shifted to brilliant golds and silvers, patterns of joy and anticipation that filled the chamber with living light. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners rather than strangers. The imperial hegemony might be coming to claim them, but they would find something entirely unexpected waiting for them. As Aurelius and Ember began preparing the bonding apparatus, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what his simple salvage operation had truly uncovered. He thought he was buying an abandoned workshop, but instead he'd found the key to a future that no one could predict. In 6 hours, that future would begin in earnest, one way or another. The bonding chamber lay hidden behind what Marcus had initially assumed was a storage wall. When Aurelius and Ember interfaced with the workshop's control systems, entire sections of the facility revealed themselves, spaces within spaces that defied the building's external dimensions. The Veltar had designed their workshop as more than a research facility. It was a complete ecosystem for nurturing the impossible. Marcus stood before the bonding apparatus, his mind still struggling to process what he was about to do. The device resembled a fusion of organic growth and technological precision, its surfaces flowing like living metal while pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. 3 alcoves were arranged in a triangular configuration, each one-sized and shaped for a different participant in the process. The neural bridging process requires physical contact during the initial phase, Ember explained, her scales now cycling through complex patterns of silver and blue that Marcus had learned indicated technical concentration. Once the connection is established, proximity becomes less critical, but the formation of the bond itself demands direct neural interface. Aurelius moved to his designated alcove, settling into the curved space with fluid grace. Despite his rapid growth over the past 3 days, he still retained an almost cat-like elegance in his movements. The process begins with a mapping phase, where neural patterns are analyzed and compatibility protocols are established. This typically takes 30 minutes. And then, Marcus asked, settling into his own alcove. The surface molded itself to accommodate his human physiology, adjusting temperature and support to optimize his comfort. Then, the connection is forged, Ember said, taking her place in the 3rd alcove. During this phase, you will experience our consciousness directly, and we will experience yours. The makers designed the process to be gradual, allowing all participants to adjust to the new reality. Marcus took a deep breath as the apparatus began to hum with increasing energy. Crystalline conductors emerged from the alcoves, positioning themselves at specific points along his spine and skull. The touch was cool and oddly comforting, like gentle fingers finding exactly the right pressure points. "Are you ready?" Aurelius asked, though the question seemed to come from inside Marcus's mind as much as through his ears. "No," Marcus replied honestly. "But let's do it anyway." The world exploded into sensation. At first, Marcus thought something had gone wrong. His consciousness seemed to fragment and expand simultaneously, his perception stretching beyond the confines of his individual mind. He could feel Aurelius's thoughts like a warm current of golden light, mathematical and precise, but tinged with curiosity and wonder. Ember's mind touched his like cool silver fire, analytical and creative, constantly building and rebuilding models of the world around them. For a terrifying moment, Marcus lost track of where he ended and the dragons began. Their memories flowed through him, inherited knowledge from the Veltar, creators mixed with experiences from their brief but intensely lived days. He saw himself through their eyes, a strange alien creature who had stumbled into their lives and chosen to care for them despite having no obligation to do so. Then, the flow stabilized, settling into distinct streams of consciousness that remained separate while sharing the same space. Marcus was still himself, but He was also more than himself, part of a triad of minds that complemented and strengthened each other. Welcome to the bond. Ember's voice echoed in his mind, carrying harmonics of emotion and meaning that spoken words could never convey. How do you feel? Aurelius asked, his mental voice warm with concern and curiosity. Marcus tested his consciousness like a person learning to walk again. He was still Marcus Chun, still human, but he could feel the dragon's presence like additional rooms in his mental house. Their knowledge was accessible, but not intrusive, their emotions present, but not overwhelming. Different, he said aloud, then realized he could communicate directly through the bond. Bigger somehow, like I've been living in a small room and someone just opened doors to a mansion. That analogy is remarkably accurate, Ember replied. The bond expands cognitive capacity by creating parallel processing channels. You are still yourself, but you now have access to our computational abilities and inherited knowledge. Marcus experimented with the connection, reaching out tentatively to touch their minds. Aurelius's thoughts were like exploring a vast library organized with mathematical precision, every concept cataloged and cross-referenced. Ember's consciousness felt like standing in an art studio where every tool was perfectly placed and every creation was part of an interconnected whole. This is incredible, he said, marveling at the depth and complexity of their shared connection. But also terrifying. How do you maintain individual identity with all this overlap? Practice, Aurelius replied with mental laughter, and the understanding that diversity strengthens the whole. We do not seek to merge completely, but to complement each other. The bonding apparatus powered down with a soft chime, its task complete. Marcus opened his eyes, realizing he had closed them at some point during the process. The world looked the same, but felt fundamentally different. He could perceive energy flows in the workshop systems, understand the purpose of devices that had been mysterious moments before, and feel the presence of his bonded partners like a constant, comforting warmth. How long was that? He asked, checking his chronometer and discovering that nearly 2 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. Subjective time distortion is normal during initial bonding, Ember explained, stretching as she emerged from her alcove. Marcus could feel her satisfaction at the successful connection, tinged with anticipation for what came next. We now have approximately 4 hours before the Imperial Hegemony fleet arrives. The reminder of their approaching deadline cut through Marcus's wonder at their new connection. Through the bond, he could sense the dragon's growing confidence, their certainty that they now had capabilities far beyond what any of them possessed individually. What exactly can we do now, he asked. More than you might expect, Aurelius said, moving to one of the workshop's main control stations. As he interfaced with the system, Marcus felt the connection open up, allowing him to experience the data flow secondhand. It was like watching someone use a computer while feeling every keystroke and seeing every screen change. Through Aurelius's connection, Marcus could see the workshop's full capabilities for the first time. Hidden weapons systems, shield generators, communication arrays powerful enough to reach across the galaxy, and fabrication systems that could produce everything from simple tools to complex starships. The Veltar had built their dragon nursery inside what was effectively a mobile fortress. The facility is far more advanced than we initially understood, Ember said, her own interface revealing additional systems. It can function as a spacecraft if necessary, equipped with quantum drives and defensive systems that rival Imperial hegemony dreadnoughts. Marcus felt a surge of hope tempered by practical concerns. Can we get operational in 4 hours? The primary systems are already active, Aurelius replied. The Veltar never fully powered down the facility when they evacuated. They simply put into standby mode, ready for rapid activation. But there's a complication, Ember added, her scales shifting to the orange patterns that indicated concern. Full activation of the facility's defensive and propulsion systems will create an energy signature visible from anywhere in the system. If the hegemony fleet hasn't already pinpointed our location, they certainly will once we power up. Marcus paced the chamber, his mind now enhanced by the dragon's analytical capabilities. The tactical situation was complex, but not hopeless. They had superior technology and the advantage of a prepared position, but they were vastly outnumbered and dealing with an enemy that had significant experience in both warfare and capturing advanced alien technologies. "What are our options?" he asked, already knowing that the bond was allowing all three of them to consider the same possibilities simultaneously. "Option 1, Aurelius said, we activate the facility's full capabilities immediately and attempt to flee the system before the hegemony fleet arrives. This gives us the best chance of avoiding direct confrontation, but commits us to a life of running. Option 2, Ember continued. We remain powered down and attempt to hide until the fleet moves on. This preserves secrecy, but leaves us vulnerable if we're discovered. Option 3, Marcus said, understanding flowing through the bond. We prepare for a fight and hope our technology is good enough to survive long enough to escape or send for help. There's a fourth option, Aurelius said quietly. One that the Veltar prepared for but hoped would never be necessary. Through the bond, Marcus felt the complexity of Aurelius's thoughts as he accessed deeper levels of the facility systems. Hidden protocols, emergency procedures, and failsafes that spoke to the Veltar's understanding of just how dangerous their creations could be in the wrong hands. The workshop can be destroyed, Aurelius explained, completely and utterly, leaving no trace of our existence or the technology used to create us. The makers included this option as a final safeguard against our capture. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Through the bond, Marcus could feel the dragon's conflicted emotions. They wanted to live, to explore their potential, and find their place in the galaxy. But they also understood their responsibility to prevent their capabilities from being misused. That's not happening, Marcus said firmly. We're not giving up before we even try to fight. Your determination is admirable, Ember said, her mental voice warm with affection. But we must consider all possibilities. If capture becomes inevitable, destroying ourselves and this facility might be the most responsible choice. Then we make sure capture doesn't become inevitable, Marcus replied. We've got the best technology in the galaxy and a crew that can interface directly with all of it. Let's see what humans and dragons can do when they work together. The bond hummed with shared resolve as all three of them committed to the fight ahead. Marcus felt his human determination strengthening the dragon's inherited caution, while their vast knowledge and computational abilities enhanced his tactical thinking. Very well, Aurelius said. We prepare for battle. But first, we need to understand our enemy better. Ember moved to a different control station, one that Marcus now recognized as a long-range sensor array. I can attempt to penetrate their communication systems, gather intelligence on their mission parameters and tactical capabilities. Is that wise? Marcus asked. Won't they detect the intrusion? Not if I'm careful, Ember replied, her scales beginning to glow with the patterns that indicated deep system interface. Our technology is several generations beyond theirs. A subtle probe should be undetectable. As Ember established her connection with the sensor array, Marcus felt the process through their bond. It was like watching someone become one with a vast electronic organism, her consciousness expanding to encompass detection systems that spanned millions of kilometers. I have them, she said, her voice taking on the harmonic quality that indicated split attention between mental tasks. Imperial Hegemony Task Force Designation Acquisition 7. 3 Dominator-class destroyers and 1 Harvester-class science vessel. Total crew complement approximately 1,500 beings. What's their mission profile? Aurelius asked, interfacing with tactical analysis systems. Retrieval and containment of high-value xenobiological assets, Ember replied. They have detailed specifications on Imperial Dragon capabilities, genetic samples for comparison, and specialized containment equipment designed specifically for creatures like us. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. They know exactly what they're looking for. Yes, Ember confirmed. But their intelligence is several months out of date. They expect to find us in early developmental stages, possibly still in our shells. They are not prepared for bonded dragons with full access to Veltar military technology. Then we surprise them, Marcus said, his tactical thinking now enhanced by draconic processing power. What weapon systems does this facility have? Aurelius's interface with the workshop's systems revealed capabilities that made Marcus whistle in amazement. Plasma cannons that could punch through heavy armor at extreme range, shield systems that could absorb incredible amounts of damage, and point defense arrays that could swat fighters out of space like insects. The makers were very thorough, Aurelius observed. This facility was designed to protect the most valuable research project in Veltar history. They equipped it accordingly. Can we take on 4 warships? Marcus asked. Individually, our weapons and shields are superior to anything in the hegemony fleet, Ember replied. However, we are still vastly outnumbered. The optimal strategy would be to eliminate 1 or 2 ships quickly, then use our mobility advantage to avoid concentrated fire from the remainder. Marcus felt the tactical plan forming in their shared consciousness, a complex dance of prediction and counter-prediction that took advantage of their unique capabilities. The bond allowed them to coordinate with a precision that no normal crew could match, each of them aware of the other's actions and intentions in real time. There's one more thing we should consider, Aurelius said quietly. If we successfully repel this attack, it will not be the end. The hegemony will send larger fleets, better equipped forces. We will have declared ourselves enemies of one of the galaxy's most powerful factions. Then, we need allies, Marcus replied. The Veltar government, other species that oppose hegemony expansion, independent systems that value freedom over imperial order. A rebellion, Ember said, her scales shifting to colors that indicated excitement and anticipation. The makers designed us to be bridges between species, to facilitate cooperation and understanding. Perhaps this is how we fulfill that purpose. Through the bond, Marcus felt the rightness of the idea. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the principle that sentient beings should be free to choose their own destiny rather than serve as tools for imperial ambition. Then, let's send the hegemony a message they won't forget, he said, moving toward the primary control station. Time to show them what humans and dragons can accomplish together. As the 3 of them began bringing the workshop's systems online, Marcus felt a surge of fierce joy through the bond. Whatever happened in the next few hours, they would face it as partners, as family, as something entirely new in the galaxy's long history of conflict and cooperation. The imperial hegemony was about to learn that some prizes came with a price too high to pay. The transformation of the workshop from research facility to fortress happened with breathtaking speed once all systems came online. Through his bond with Aurelius and Ember, Marcus experienced the awakening of technology that had been dormant for months, vast networks of energy and information flowing through conduits that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. Quantum shields at full strength, Ember reported, her consciousness merged with the facility's defensive systems. Plasma cannon arrays charging. Point defense networks active. We are as ready as we can be. Marcus stood at the central command interface, his human intuition now enhanced by draconic processing power. Through the bond, he could feel every system in the facility as if it were part of his own body. The sensation was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Enemy fleet dropping to sublight speed at the system's edge, Aurelius announced, his awareness extended through sensor arrays that spanned millions of kilometers. They are conducting a systematic search pattern, moving toward our location with deliberate precision. How long until they reach us? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer through their shared consciousness. 47 minutes at their current approach velocity, Ember replied. They are being cautious, scanning each planetary body thoroughly before moving on to the next. Marcus felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The hegemony's caution would work in their favor, giving them more time to prepare and coordinate their defense. Through the bond, he could sense Aurelius and Ember's growing confidence in their abilities, their inherited knowledge combining with his human creativity to develop tactics that neither species could have conceived alone. "I have an idea," he said, accessing the facility's fabrication systems. "Can we create decoys? False energy signatures that would look like other research facilities?" "Certainly," Aurelius replied, his mental voice bright with understanding. The Veltar fabrication technology can create convincing holographic projections with matching energy outputs. We could make it appear that there are multiple installations throughout this system. "Do it," Marcus ordered, feeling the rightness of the strategy flow through their shared connection. Force them to split their attention, maybe even divide their fleet. As Aurelius began manufacturing the decoy systems, Ember turned her attention to the approaching warships. Her consciousness reached out through the sensor networks, probing the enemy fleet with touches so light they went unnoticed by Imperial detection systems. "I am reading their tactical communications," she reported. "They have confirmed our general location, but are uncertain about the facility's exact position and capabilities. Their mission commander is debating whether to call for additional reinforcements before proceeding." "Let's help him make that decision," Marcus said, triggering the first wave of decoys. Across the planet's surface, energy signatures bloomed into existence, each one mimicking the quantum resonance pattern of a major research installation. Through the sensor feeds, they watched the Imperial fleet's reaction. The lead destroyer's movement pattern shifted, its captain clearly surprised by the sudden appearance of multiple targets. Emergency communications flowed between the ships as they tried to determine which signals were real and which were deceptions. "They are dividing their force," Aurelius observed with satisfaction. Two destroyers moving toward the false signals, one destroyer and the science vessel continuing toward our actual location. Marcus felt a fierce joy surge through the bond. Human tactical thinking, enhanced by draconic computational power, had just turned a hopeless battle into a winnable engagement. Instead of facing 4 warships, they would now face 2, with the possibility of eliminating those before the others could return. "Prepare to activate the facility's mobility systems," he ordered. "Once we engage the first group, we need to be ready to relocate before the entire fleet can converge on us." "Mobility systems?" Ember asked, her surprise coloring the bond with shades of confusion. "The workshop isn't just a facility," Marcus explained, his understanding flowing from access to the deepest levels of Veltar technology. "It's a ship, a very large, very advanced ship that's been disguised as a planetary installation." Through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt the dragon's amazement as they discovered capabilities in their birthplace that they hadn't suspected. The Veltar had built their research facility inside a vessel that could traverse interstellar space, equipped with quantum drives that could outrun anything in the Imperial fleet. "The makers were even more paranoid than we realized," Aurelius observed. "They built a mobile fortress for our protection. And now we're going to use it," Marcus said, feeling the massive drives beginning to charge. "Let's show the hegemony what happens when humans and dragons work together." The first Imperial destroyer came into weapons range 12 minutes later, its commander apparently confident that a single research facility posed no significant threat. Marcus felt savage satisfaction as the enemy ship's sensors finally registered the true capabilities of what they were facing, but by then, it was too late for effective evasive action. "Fire," Marcus ordered, and the workshop's plasma cannon spoke. The beams that lanced out were invisible in vacuum, but devastating in effect. The Imperial destroyer's shields flared and collapsed under the assault, its armor buckling as focused plasma ate through layers of composite metal. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as internal systems overloaded and failed. "Direct hit," Ember reported, her consciousness merged with the targeting systems. Enemy vessel suffering catastrophic damage. They are attempting to withdraw. Don't let them, Marcus said. If any ship escapes to report our capabilities, we'll have the entire Imperial Navy hunting us. The second salvo finished the destroyer, its reactor containment failing in a burst of light that briefly outshone the system's star. The science vessel, trailing behind its escort, immediately began transmitting distress signals and attempting to flee. I can block their communications, Aurelius offered, his interface with the facility's quantum communication array allowing him to jam Imperial transmissions. Do it, Marcus ordered, but be ready to lift off. The other two destroyers will have noticed the explosion and will be heading this way at maximum speed. The science vessel lasted less than 30 seconds against concentrated fire from the facility's weapons array. Its specialized research equipment was no match for military-grade plasma cannons, and its destruction left no survivors to report on what they had encountered. Quantum drives online, Ember announced as the massive facility began to rise from the planet's surface. Where are we going? Marcus felt the answer flow through their bond, a destination that made perfect sense given their new circumstances. The Veltar homeworld. It's time to return the Maker's children to their creators. The remaining destroyers are converging on our last position, Aurelius reported. They will arrive in approximately 6 minutes. Let them find empty space, Marcus said, triggering the quantum drive. By the time they figure out what happened, we'll be halfway to Veltar space. The transition to quantum speed was smoother than anything Marcus had experienced on conventional vessels. The Veltar technology seemed to fold space around them rather than forcing them through it, creating a journey that felt more like a gentle current than the violent acceleration of traditional faster-than-light travel. I am detecting quantum communication signals, Ember announced as they settled into their course. The Veltar government is attempting to establish contact. Put them through, Marcus said, curious about how the Dragon's creators would react to their unexpected return. The holographic display that materialized showed a being that was unmistakably Veltar, its flowing robes and elongated features graceful even in two-dimensional representation. But there was something in its posture that suggested both relief and apprehension. Greetings, young ones, the Veltar said, its translated words carrying harmonic undertones of complex emotion. I am Researcher Prime Veltherin, leader of the Imperial Dragon Project. We had feared you were lost when the facility went silent. We are safe, Researcher Prime, Aurelius replied, his mental voice somehow translating into the harmonic speech patterns of his creators. Though our circumstances have changed significantly since your departure. Indeed, Veltherin said, its attention shifting to Marcus. You appear to have bonded with a being unknown to our genetic databases. This was not part of the original protocol. The protocols became irrelevant when the Imperial hegemony attempted to claim us. Ember interjected, her scales shifting to colors that Marcus recognized as controlled anger. We were forced to adapt to survive. Through the bond, Marcus felt the dragon's complex emotions regarding their creators. There was affection and respect, but also disappointment and a growing sense of independence. They were no longer the helpless hatchlings that the Veltar had left behind. The human is Marcus Chun, Aurelius explained. He purchased the research facility legally and discovered us during the final stages of our incubation. When faced with our need for bonding partners, he chose to accept the responsibility rather than abandon us. Veltherin's expression was difficult to read, but Marcus sensed approval mixed with concern. You have done well, Marcus Chun of the humans, though I suspect you did not anticipate the complexity of your acquisition. That's an understatement, Marcus replied, but I don't regret it. These two are remarkable beings, and they deserve the chance to determine their own future. Their future, and that of many others, depends on the choices we make in the coming days, Veltherin said. The Imperial hegemony's attempt to claim them was not an isolated incident. Intelligence reports suggest they are planning a systematic campaign to acquire all advanced biotechnology, regardless of its origin or the wishes of its creators. Marcus felt understanding dawn through the bond. This is about more than just Aurelius and Ember. The hegemony is making a play for technological dominance across the entire galaxy. Precisely, Veltherin confirmed. Your successful defense of the research facility was the first time anyone has effectively resisted their acquisition efforts. This will have consequences that extend far beyond our individual species. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt the dragons processing this information with capabilities that far exceeded normal organic intelligence. They were seeing patterns, connections, and implications that painted a picture of galactic conflict on a scale that would dwarf any previous war. "You're asking us to become symbols," Ember said quietly, "to represent resistance to imperial expansion. I am asking you to become what you were designed to be," Veltherin replied. "Bridges between species, facilitators of cooperation and understanding. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, and your unique capabilities may determine which path we take." Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders once again. What had started as a simple salvage operation had become something that could reshape the balance of power among the stars. But looking at Aurelius and Ember through both his eyes and their bond, he knew there was really only one choice. "Then we build bridges," he said. "We find allies, create networks of cooperation, and show the galaxy that there's a better way than imperial domination." "It will not be easy," Veltherin warned. "The hegemony has vast resources and few scruples about how they use them. You will be hunted, pursued, and attacked by forces that see you only as prizes to be claimed." "Let them come," Aurelius said, his mental voice carrying harmonics of determination that resonated through the bond. "We are no longer helpless hatchlings waiting for protection. We are bonded dragons with the power to defend ourselves and others." "Besides," Ember added, her scales shifting to the brilliant golds that indicated fierce joy, "we have something the hegemony doesn't expect. Human stubbornness combined with draconic capability. That's a combination they're not prepared to handle." Marcus laughed, feeling the dragon's amusement echo through their bond. "She's right. We've already surprised them once. Let's see how many more surprises we can deliver." As their ship continued its journey toward Veltar space, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this point. He'd purchased an abandoned workshop looking for valuable salvage, and instead found a family, a cause, and a future that none of them could have imagined. Through the bond, he felt Aurelius and Ember's contentment, their satisfaction with the choices they had made, and the path they had chosen. They were no longer just the products of Veltar engineering. They were individuals with their own goals, values, and determination to shape their destiny. "So what happens next?" Marcus asked, already knowing that their shared consciousness was working through the same possibilities. "Next," Ember said, "we help organize a galaxy-wide resistance to imperial expansion. We find species that value freedom over security, individuals who believe in cooperation over domination. We become exactly what we were designed to be," Aurelius added, "but on our own terms for our own reasons." Marcus nodded, feeling the rightness of their purpose flow through the bond. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Human and dragon, individual and collective, creatures of flesh and blood and metal who had chosen to stand for something greater than themselves. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what they intended. As the quantum drives carried them toward uncertain but chosen destiny, Marcus couldn't help but smile. He'd set out to buy some abandoned alien equipment and ended up becoming part of the most extraordinary partnership in galactic history. It wasn't the future he'd planned, but it was the future he wanted. Through the bond, he felt Aurelius and Ember's complete agreement, their shared determination to build a galaxy where beings could choose their own path rather than submit to the will of those who claimed the right to rule. The imperial hegemony thought they were hunting valuable prizes. What they would find instead was something far more dangerous. The beginning of their own end, delivered by a salvage dealer and two dragons who had learned that some things were worth fighting for. The real adventure was just beginning.